Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on Cyber Essentials versus ISO 27001. I'll do the formal introductions in a minute, but I was just saying to Ashley there, who is my colleague on the call, that this sounds like it sounds like a boxing match between 27001 and Cyber Essentials. Although
Yeah,
we
it
will
does a
be
bit.
operating as a tag team between slides. So, as I say, you're all welcome to this webinar. So we'll go through some of the formalities. I've got a few poll questions to do, and then we'll kick into the content. So if I press the right button, always helps. So you're all going to be muted. So the only people you'll be able to hear is myself and Ashley. You can submit questions online, and we're going to have time at the end of this to go through those answers and questions, etc. So Cyber Essentials questions, ISO 27001 questions, depending on who they're aimed at, will be depending on who answers them. And you'll get a copy of the presentation, the slides afterwards, and you'll also get a discount code in there for Cyber Essentials. So that's a key useful thing, is if that's what the thing that you're interested in. So as we say, so who are we? IT governance. Well, probably quite a lot of you know who we are if you're on some sort of mailing list or you're a customer or something. So you've joined this and you know who we are. So we've been going for 20 years plus, 180 employees. We, as a business, really sort of started off in the ISO 27001 space and also the books and standards. The founder of the business, a gentleman called Alan Calder, has wrote a book on IT governance many years ago, which is now, I think, in the 8th or 9th edition. I bought my first one in the 2nd edition. That shows you how long I've been around in doing this sort of thing. But we have a publishing end side. I've also published a book through IT governance. We do a lot of learning, training, staff awareness. So we do online courses. We do across 27001, ISACA, all these different things, lots and lots of different courses, data protection, some of the more technical courses as well, CISP, etc., all those sort of things. We have our consulting division, which deals with 27001, 22301, DORA, GDPR. We also have our legal side and data protection side, and Cyber Essentials, which is where Ashley's from. So we do all these sort of things, but we've been, as you can see there, 12,000 clients across 5 continents. It is not unusual in a day that I can be talking to people on at least 3 different continents, which means that, as I always jokingly say, that as a business, we do not recognize time zones. So I can be doing a call to Africa in the morning, one into Europe, and then one into the United States in the afternoon. All depends what's going on. But we do that by wide variety of things across the scape of what you can call GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So there's a few other things in there. So we've done more than 1,300 projects. Sometimes I feel like I might have done them all, but I know I haven't. We've done over 15,000 delegates. I've done a good chunk of them, but not 15,000. Over 7,000 Cyber Essential certificates. That's a lot. That's a lot of certificates. And we've done over 200. We've almost got probably a bit more than that. 2,500 people who use our compliance software called Cyber Comply, which has toolkits in it. It is used for if you want to do 27001. It's got data protection things in there. Lots and lots of stuff. And there you can see some of the things that we got. Interesting to see we are 27001 certified, 9001, 27701. ISACA, we're an approved ISACA trainer, and I'm an ISACA trainer for CISM and C-Risk, and Cyber Essentials Certified Plus. You'd hope we were one of those as well. So all those different things. So we in the cyber security space, we're one-stop shop. We do it from technical stuff to governance, risk, and compliance. So let's talk about who myself and Ashley are. So I'm Andrew Patson. I'm the head of consulting for the European part of the business, and I cover that side of it. We're global in our area, so we have a UK large UK consultancy business, a European one, and also a US based one. But we also work around the world. I've been doing this sort of stuff for quite a while, as you can probably tell by the look of me. And recently I published a book on DORA. If any of you are in London next week at the FMLS conference, next Wednesday I'm going to be on a panel talking about AI and fraud. So that should be quite interesting, one hopes. And I go and talk at conferences and all that sort of stuff. But the sort of things that I've been doing here recently, I've worked with Saudi Arabia company. I spent a lot of time working in Morocco and all these sort of things. So GRC I've been doing since the early 90s. So here's Ashley. I'm not too sure what he was doing in the early 90s, but it probably wasn't GRC. This is the point when I said he wasn't here in the early 90s, and I get a bit depressed about my age. So he's a strong focus on the Cyber Essentials. So this morning he was working on Cyber Essentials, but he also has great 27001 knowledge. He holds a master's degree from the University of Hertfordshire in cybersecurity. Interestingly enough, we both went to the same university. Although when I went there, it was actually a polytechnic, and after a year of me being there, they decided they wanted to become a university. So I think that was just down to me. So we were alumni, although there was a bit of difference in the years we went. So he's worked on countless numbers of Cyber Essentials Plus. So there's two types of Cyber Essentials, which Ashley will talk about, and he's been helping customers because he's not only got the Cyber Essentials knowledge, he's also got the 27001, and he does a lot of blogs, webinars, and social media. Social media. I'm not great at. That's more of a Ashley's age group who get involved in that. So that's who we are. So as I said, we will be jumping between slides where I'll do some slides and Ashley will do some slides, and where maybe we'll talk about the same slides at the same time. So what are we going to talk about here? So what is the agenda? So misconceptions and realities of Cyber Essentials. Okay, so this is what Ashley's going to be talking about. I think there's, as you'll discover, that people have quite often these sort of things, and the same with 27001, they have a view of what it is. And quite often it's actually not what it is. And the same with Cyber Essentials. They're very different, but they're both very, very useful approaches. The benefits of Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001 for various types of organizations. Comparison of the frameworks, although 27001 is the standard. Yeah, how do we compare them? What do they do in this area and that area, etc. Preparation. So the key things you'd have to do for Cyber Essentials, and also the sort of things you need to do for 27001. What we're doing and what our solutions are, and then we'll do questions and answers. So you'll need to submit questions because we're not mind readers. So if you have any questions, as I always say to people, there's no such thing as a silly question, but believe me, we can give you a silly answer. But we'll try not to on that. So I'm going to be doing a few slides, and then I'll hand over to Ashley, who will have to ask me every time he needs to move on to a slide if I can move on to a slide, because I have all the power with the mouse, and we'll kick him from there. But before we do any of that, we're going to do some poll questions. So my colleague Mahalia in a minute will flick up a poll thing on this. So the question is, which best describes your organization's current certification status and goals? You've got 27001, you've got Cyber Essentials certified, both ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials certified, exploring certification options, new to cybersecurity, considering first steps. So we've got give you all a few minutes, because it's nice to get quite a few responses on this. Gosh, it's like watching the results of the US elections last week. Turnout's going up. Okay, so we're it's that down. So, okay, okay, thank you very much. Could you have shared that poll? I don't know, Mahalia, is that too late now? I think, yeah. Okay then. Can they see the poll? If not, it's interesting. The single biggest one is exploring certification options. interesting enough, about 20% have got both Cyber Essentials and 27,001. We'll talk why people might have that. Cyber Essentials certified, and we've got a few people there who've just got 27,001. So that's a reasonable amount of information there. Okay, then, that's interesting. Right, we'll go on to the next question. Right, okay, so where are you in the certification journey? Okay, and what's your timeline? Just starting research, actively planning with a target of 3 to 6 months, implementing controls, aiming for certification 6 to 12 months, ready for assessment or recertifying within 3 months, not sure of timeline. And I think it sounds like we're talking about, they used to say on X Factors, it's a journey, not a destination. And any certification process is a journey. It's definitely not a destination. Okay, we're almost. A few more votes, please, and it'll be interesting to see where everybody is. Right, so it's actually on this. It's a pretty much split across all of them. So, the single biggest one, implementing controls, aiming for certification, but it's almost everybody's around 20% on that one. Okay, then. Interesting. And the last question. What is your biggest challenge in achieving certification with Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001? Okay, the front runners there, so we're getting some, yeah, it looks like a graphic equalizer going up and down here at the moment. Right, we're getting the results in. Right, again, we seem to have a pretty, the lowest one there is preparing for audit process, but we're implementing necessary controls, resources and budget constraints, understanding certification requirements, justifying certification to stakeholders. That's always a fun one. Justifying it to the top management, as we call it in ISO 27001, about why do we need to do this? And quite often you need to do these things because a customer or a regulator has said you must do it. A lot of these things we sometimes think that we do because everybody wants to be nice human beings and all that sort of stuff, but it's actually driven by external factors or interested parties and that sort of thing. Right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to sit there and we're going to, at this point, I'm going to pass over to Ashley. So
thanks, Andrew, and thanks for your introduction. Yeah, so it's interesting to see everyone's at a different stage in their certification journey. So we're going to start off with looking at the misconceptions and realities of Cyber Essentials. Next slide. Okay, so the first thing is understanding the basics. So often with Cyber Essentials, it's viewed as a simple entry-level measure to looking into implemented security controls. So there's 5 key controls that Cyber Essentials looks at that can help prevent 80% of cyber attacks. So this covers the most common vulnerabilities that hackers will look to exploit. So often it's simple things such as implementing a software firewall, which is easy to do on any device. None of the controls are particularly difficult. So as you can see, they're practical and cost effective. So they give organizations an accessible way to start beginning and building upon their security framework without needing sort of advanced technical knowledge on how to implement the controls. So for many organizations, Cyber Essentials is an effective first line of defense. So it strengthens your cybersecurity posture against these opportunist type of attacks. Next slide. So there's some common misconceptions with Cyber Essentials is that it's straightforward yet effective. I would say often people might view it as being straightforward but not effective because of how straightforward it is. But that doesn't mean it's not important. Each of the 5 controls are very important and need to all be considered and implemented to pass. So it's highly structured in what it's looking for. So so it's focused on high impact, low cost measures. As I was saying before, something as simple as turning a software firewall on doesn't cost the organization any money, as software firewalls are often built in on, well, pretty much every device. On a Windows device, it's easy to turn on. Also things such as MFA. Most cloud services nowadays offer MFA, which can be enabled in the security settings. So that could be it sending a passcode to your mobile phone, giving it that extra layer of protection. Another misconception is there's no room for grey areas. So with Cyber Essentials, it's a pass or a fail. So it's very black and white in what it's looking for. So when I'm marking an assessment, it's either looking to see that control is in place, or if it's not in place, it'll be a major non-conformance. When you compare this to ISO 27001, there's a lot more sort of flexibility for what controls you can have in place, and it's more risk-based, looking at what controls in place to meet a certain risk, but it doesn't give you that sort of flexibility with Cyber Essentials. You either have it or you don't. All right, ready for the next one. Okay, so who benefits from Cyber Essentials certification? So the first thing with Cyber Essentials is very cost effective to get into, especially with Cyber Essentials Basic. That typically doesn't cost more than £500, £600 to achieve. It gets a bit more expensive with Cyber Essentials Plus. For smaller organisations, can be around £2,000, but for larger ones, it can be sort of £3,000 plus. But when you compare it to ISO 27001, there's a lot more sort of time and resources you need to put into that to achieve it. With Cyber Essentials Plus, it's a sort of point in time test, as opposed to ISO 27001, which requires sort of constant attention to maintain. So the requirements for Cyber Essentials are very accessible. As I was saying before, you don't need complex technical knowledge to implement these controls. They're very accessible for all types of users. And IASME have a document, I think it's the IT requirements document, that you can look through, and it goes into further detail about all of the requirements for you to look into and understand. And at ITG, we're also very helpful at providing guidance to our customers, where we can explain the controls and how best to implement them, and sort of give our point of view across to the customer there. So achieving Cyber Essentials demonstrates a level of commitment towards security. So it shows your customers that you're serious about protecting their data. So this can help with achieving work with third parties, with securing work with third parties. So often they might ask for Cyber Essentials as part of the contract to see that security has been taken seriously and they know you're going to protect their data. So the last one is scalable security. So with Cyber Essentials, I think a good approach is to look at it as a framework for having a secure baseline of security and building and expanding upon that. So that's why often people will see Cyber Essentials as a stepping stone towards other standards. Other standards such as ISO 27001 that are a lot more expensive and can be a lot more time consuming, require a lot more resources, and they're a lot more comprehensive. There's a lot of things that aren't included in Cyber Essentials that are in ISO. An example would be like a security awareness program. That's something that's looked at in ISO but not in Cyber Essentials, which takes a lot of time to develop and maintain. Yeah, ready for the next slide.
Okay.
Oh, is this one on to you?
No, you're the one after this one as well.
Okay, so no problem. Right, yep, so we're going to be looking at the benefits of Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001 for various types of organizations. Yep, so as I was saying before, so achieving Cyber Essentials, one of the main benefits is that it gives you a good security baseline. It gives you a higher level of confidence that 80% of threats you're going to be protected against. So implementing those 5 controls, you can yeah, so you can show customer confidence by implementing those 5 controls, that you've taken that commitment in implementing those controls to greatly reduce the chance of being exposed to an attack from potentially a malicious hacker. Um, so by providing greater confidence, it also gives confidence for contracts. Um, Often in contracts, you're required to have cyber essentials. So it'll be part of the contract is that you need cyber essentials certification. Could either be basic or plus as well. But in a lot of government contracts, they actually require that you need cyber essentials. And not even just with the government now, it's often it's been included into banking as well. So yeah, I know like the NHS, banking, lots of like government organisations, you require cyber essentials. So there's also insurance perks of having cyber essentials, so it can increase your premium on cyber insurance. Reason behind that is that you're obviously less likely to encounter a cyber attack. Your company's operating more securely, so there's less risk. Yeah, the insurer will see it as less risk of that happening. So yeah, fees are cheaper, which is always a plus. Ready for the next slide?
Right, now we're back to
This
me.
might be
I
you.
think a concept to try and think about where cyber essentials came from. Um, if you think about it, it was it's a government scheme. You need to basically do it if you're a government scheme, but think of it like a vaccine. Okay, so if you think about like how vaccines work, they rely on a large portion of the population having the vaccine, and so cyber essentials certification doesn't only just help you as an individual business, but collectively, if lots of businesses are doing it, you basically, and I always talk about this with security, is all you can ever do is make the window of opportunity for the bad guys smaller. So collectively, you're all protecting each other, because if your supply chain's got it, your customers have got it, you've got it. If you're dealing with that 80% of the sort of like almost not quite obvious stuff, but the easy stuff to deal with, you're making it a lot harder for the bad guys to do something. So it works very much like that. It's like a vaccine for the UK PLC. So it means that there's less opportunity for places to get footholds and affect everything, because everybody's so connected nowadays. I know from financial services about who operates and connects into it. It's about that sort of like national vaccine is a way to look at it. So that's where it's very useful. Now, there's some great stuff on cyber comply. The thing is to think about, etc. It is not one or other with 27,001 cyber comply. 27,001 is so cyber comply is a UK government scheme, okay, and it's pretty good. And I think we as a country have been quite proactive in some of the stuff we have done compared to some of our competitors, etc. There's lots of different schemes out there, so it's really good. But so what is 27,001? So the big benefit, because it's an international standard, it's globally recognized. So it's a universal best benchmark. So if you've got 27,001 certification in your business by an accredited certification body, okay, who is so the certification body is approved by someone like UCAS or one of the national accreditation bodies. It means that if you're in Birmingham and you've got 27,001 and you're trying to do business with someone in Tokyo, they know what it means. It's an understandable benchmark, and they understand the sort of things you've had to do to go through to get you 27,001. So that is very, very useful. It's about risk. Okay. So 27,001 has clauses and controls. Clauses are mandatory. Controls are not mandatory. You implement the controls based on what your risks are. Now you will do. Sometimes you might not have a risk for control, but you'll still do it because it's best practice or legal, regulatory, contractual requirements. But it's all about risk. It's all about proportionality. It's not a very pragmatic standard. It tells you where to get to, doesn't tell you how to get there. Whereas Cyber Essentials is very regimented. It is binary, yes or no. 27,001 is, well, what's your risk? Okay, and that's a key thing. So that because it is risk based, it is proportional to your organisation. Compliance and competitive edge. Yeah, you tell your customers, you tell your interested parties that we're taking security serious. It is significantly about, are you doing reasonable stuff as a business? Are you taking reasonable actions to secure your information, your customers' information, your supply chain, all these sort of things? And so, key advantage of 27001, ISO 27001, not only technical controls, but also extensive policies, risk management, giving organisations a holistic approach to security. Of the controls, just slightly over a third of them are technical. It's people, process, technology. It's all about people. It's about organisation, all those sort of things. So it's actually, there's a lot more in there than just technical. And remember, 27001 is information security. So it's not just about cyber, okay? It's about your information in all of its forms. So it's got that broader depth, whereas Cyber Essentials is just computers, those things, sits on your desk and all that sort of stuff. So that's the benefits. So I'm now going to do a few more slides on the next section, which is comparison of the framework and their suitability for different size organizations. Right, so organizational fit. So think about where you are: small, large, highly regulated. Now, this is what you think about, but of course, remember, you might be actually having an interested party or a customer or a regulator or whatever saying you need to do this. So particularly if you're going to do anything work in government, health, all these sort of areas, you have to have Cyber Essentials. But it's definitely great fit, especially for businesses needing a foundational level of protection without heavy resource investment. So think about it. It deals with 80% of the things you need to worry about. So if you're a small business, okay, or you don't have huge amount of resource in this area, it's a really good thing to do. 27001 may be challenging for small organisations due to complexity and cost, but not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. We'll talk about fast track later. We have the smallest organisation I've certified for 27001 had 2 people in it. Okay, the biggest organisation I've worked with 27001 had 85,000 people working in it, and it works for both. Okay, so that shows you how flexible 27001 is. Large organisations, limited effectiveness in complex environments as it does not cover advanced controls. Limited, but still useful. Still useful. It's still worth doing because it's basic. If you're not doing these things, you need to think very carefully about why you're not doing them. Okay, because remember, they're the 80%. They cover 80% of the things, and they're all, you've got to do them, but they're all straightforward. Ideal, so 27001, ideal for large and multinational corporations requiring a robust security management system. Yeah, very, very useful. And then regulated industries. So again, baseline. So Cyber Essentials gives you a baseline, but it gives you a platform to build on. We think about security as like, we talked about the little window, but think about it as a wall, okay? And it's building blocks, and you're getting higher and stronger and everything. And so everything contributes to that. So, having Cyber Essentials contributes to that. Even if it's not the end destination, the end point, it gets you there. And often mandated for compliance in industries like finance, healthcare, and critical infrastructure. I'll give you an example. If any of you are European and dealing with a thing called DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act, mentioned the book earlier, signed copies are available, and you have to deal with that. Having 27001 makes it a lot easier for you. Still a lot of work, still lots of things to do, but it gives you the structure. So in regulated industries, 27001 gives you a management system. And if you have a management system based on risk, it makes all those sort of things feel a lot easier. So if we look at sort of like direct comparisons of the two things. So again, it's not a fight between 27001 and Cyber Essentials. They do different things. They answer different questions. So if we look at the purpose, so aims to protect against common cyber threats and a focus on simple, cost-effective controls. Low-hanging fruit, another expression. And think about it, it's that vaccine, okay? If we're all doing that, everybody is in a better place. 27001 establishes a comprehensive information security management system to manage and mitigate a wide range of risks. So it's a process, it's a management system, it's a constant, continual improvement. It's a 3-year process between start and recertification. There's you never get to the end of it. You're always doing something. Again, ideal for Cyber Essentials, small to medium-sized businesses, startups, companies new to cybersecurity. Yes, good entry point. Again, and 27001 can be good for small to medium size, but it works quite well in large and complex. Its size, culturally, organisationally, it's agnostic about what type of organisation you are. Controls, you've got 5 basic technical control areas. ISO 27001 has 93 controls, which what you do is based on what your risk is. Risk management doesn't do anything with risk in Cyber Essentials, and 27001 is risk all day long. It's all about risk, because it's risk to your objectives of your organisation. That's why 27001 makes sense, because you understand what your objectives you're trying to achieve, and 27001 protects that. Flexibility, Cyber Essentials is binary, as it yes, no, black or white. 27001 does whatever you need it to do as an organisation, completely flexible. Documentation can be quite extensive in 27001, depends how complex your system is. You could go into a system where they have a 1-paragraph line on their cryptography policy. Go into another organisation, it could be 250 pages long, depends what they do. But it has to meet the risk. Other things, so certification process, annual self-assessment or independent verification for Cyber Essentials. 3 to 6 months, yeah, stage 1, stage 2. Then there's continual assessment, there's recertification after 3 years. You spend a lot of time being audited under 27001, both external and internal. You get quite used to it eventually. It's a bit of a shock to start off with, particularly if you've developed a system, but you get there eventually. Annually on Cyber Essentials to ensure ongoing compliance, cost and resources, potentially a big difference depending on how big the organisation is. So we know there's, as Ashley pointed out, there's difference between the size of the complexity on Cyber Essentials, but definitely on 27001, it's going to be a lot cheaper for an organisation with 15 people to do it than one with 35,000. Yeah, so that's the thing. Customer trust and competitive edge. Yeah, they both tell something to somebody. If you're a small business, Cyber Essentials says you're at least thinking about it, and you're doing these basic things, and it shows a commitment, shows you might be on a journey. 27001, again, it's about confidence to your stakeholders and all that sort of stuff. So it's again is an incredibly important thing. So they cover sort of like, they're different, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both in place, and actually, if you've got Cyber Essentials in place, that will help you with your technical controls on 27001 to a lesser greater extent. Right, so again, we talk about the certification tiers. So you've got Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essential Plus. So that includes the SAQ, so that's a self-assessment questionnaire, and an additional technical audit by an independent assessor. That's Ashley, not me. Although I have actually done one myself many, many, many years ago, so I could just about remember it. I had to do stuff with firewalls and things like that. And as a GRC consultant or person, that is not where I want to be. So again, having people who actually really understand it help you makes life a lot more straightforward. Validity, annual recertification. 27001 requires a full implemented system running. You have one level of certification. You're either certified or you're not. You have a stage 1 and stage 2 audit. You then get a certificate. Certificate lasts for 3 years, but you get surveillance audits during those 3 years. And depending on how big, complex, depends on how many audits you get. I know of customers who get external audits of in excess of 50 days a year, okay, because of their global and complex, and their internal audit program just runs all year. lots and lots of audits. So all these sort of things, again, it's defined or based on how big you are as an organisation. So I'm now going to take a rest. I'm going to hand back for a few slides to Ashley, and then I'll come back, and then Ashley comes back, and then I'll come back. As I said, tag team. So over you to you.
Cheers, Andrew. Yep, so next we're going to be looking at the preparation steps for Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001 implementation. Okay, yeah, so these are the 5 main controls that Cyber Essentials looks at. So the first one is firewalls. So firewalls, they filter incoming and outgoing traffic. So lots of companies actually use a corporate VPN, which is another compliant option. So with that, it containerizes the traffic, and there'll be a hardware firewall at the other end going into the company's internal network. So that firewall will look at the traffic. So that's another acceptable measure. But simply having a software firewall turned on is compliant with Cyber Essentials. So it's quite a cost-effective way to meet that requirement without having to spend too much money. The next one is secure configuration. So that's checking that all your devices are securely configured. So this could be disabling ports on the devices. So you can't enter USB sticks, for example. Devices should also have locking enabled. So after a certain amount of time, the lock screen shows you need to enter a password to go back into the device. So quite simple controls there. Also, autoplay should be disabled, so no software should automatically execute on the device. You should be given an option before something automatically executes. So that's one of the tests on Cyber Essentials Plus. We look at different malware files and we make sure they don't automatically execute. You can set it up within the browser so that it gives you the option to save the file first. Typically, a lot of customers do that. And also another thing is to make sure all software that isn't being used is removed or disabled. So I often see a lot of browsers that aren't being used in assessments. So really, if you're not using Chrome or Firefox and just use Edge, there's no point having all 3 on there, because it could be that one of them isn't receiving security updates. It's a lot easier to maintain just one browser on that machine. So I'd always advise customers look at what software they're using and have sort of a clean up and go through any they're not using. So it might mean reaching out to employees to check what's relevant or not. So next one is patch management. So with patch management, that's an important control to meet to pass Cyber Essentials Plus, as part of Cyber Essentials Plus is carrying out a vulnerability test, which returns it'll return all vulnerabilities on the device, and any above a CVSS score of 7 need to be remediated. So if you have strong patch management in place, it will hopefully reduce the size of that report, meaning there's less work to carry out during that part. But yeah, for basic, you also need to select yes that you have patch management and you're updating devices within 14 days. But yeah, that is tested on Cyber Essentials Plus, so it's best to be truthful on your Cyber Essentials application so that it's not a shock when you come to the Plus. Hopefully there's a lot less vulnerabilities, but there's always some stuff that just by having patch management in place and not a dedicated vulnerability scanner, there's always some stuff that it will pick up, but that's to be expected on the Plus, and it's kind of a learning point that we discuss with the customers. So with patch management, you can do it manually and automatic. So always suggest that you have automatic patch management in place using some sort of software, but you should also know how to manually update the software yourself, so you're not purely reliant on that. So you've got 2 forms of making sure things are updated. Okay, so the next control is user access control. So for user access control, I always advise that you go by the principle of least privilege. So giving the most limited access for that user to do their job role. So for example, a HR user shouldn't have administrative rights on the machine to carry out sort of technical job functions, such as changing things in the registry. That would be an IT admin's role, so they shouldn't have those sort of rights. So one of the tests during Cyber Essentials Plus is checking that the accounts are logged onto a standard user. So they shouldn't be logged onto an admin user account. They only need to be logged onto a standard to perform their day-to-day functions. And if it's like an IT admin, they should be able to elevate using UAC to carry out any of those job functions that are administrator related, so changing things in the registry editor, etc. The last one is malware protection. So you need to have antivirus software on all of your devices, and it needs to be updated when the update's available. So as one of the tests on Cyber Essentials Plus, I'll always go into the antivirus software and check that's received the latest updates. So a lot of companies use smarter antivirus solutions now, such as SentinelOne and CrowdStrike. So a lot of these smarter solutions actually analyze they basically analyze the threat first, like in a containerized like sandbox environment, and determine whether it's a threat or not. Whereas the more simple antivirus software simply look to see if the signature matches. But both of these are compliant. So even just having Windows Defender enabled, which is a lot more cost effective for most organizations, is compliant enough to pass Cyber Essentials. So you don't need some super expensive, fancy antivirus software to pass, is what I'm trying to say. Ready for the next slide?
Okay, and it's over to me for the next one. So,
yeah,
and then you get one slide of me, and then back to Ashley. So, preparation. So, Ashley covered the preparation there you need to do with the Cyber Essentials, and if you're implementing 27001, doesn't matter what size of organisation, the sort of things you're going to need to do is conduct a gap analysis. So look at the requirements of the standard and how you match them. Then you can understand where you need to think about it. Develop required policies. So there's going to be some things in there. So there's going to be certain documentation you're going to need to develop because it's mandatory. Okay. And it will tell you that either in the clauses, or if you're going to go do the controls and you're implementing the control, it will tell you need a policy, or a process. However, just a note that even you don't have to document everything in 27001. If it's mandatory, you do. But if it's not, it's about being able to demonstrate that the process is understood across the business. Statement of applicability. This is an interesting one. This is about the controls in Annex A, and you're basically saying that which ones are applicable. If you aren't implementing a control because a risk doesn't exist relating to it, or there's no business, regulatory, contractual requirement for it, or best practice, you exclude the control. But you have to explain why you exclude the control. And for the controls you're including, you have to say the reason, high-level reason why you're including those controls. And mainly they'll be driven by risk. And the statement of applicability is also, if you are looking at someone's certification, you need to understand what their statement of applicability looks like. And the classic thing there, the big piece of work, is risk treatment. So you've identified the risks, you're implementing controls to address the risks. Have you got a risk treatment plan? So that's pretty straightforward. And the process for 27001 is pretty straightforward. Little time consuming, again, depending on how big the organisation is. Now, just a few little slides left from Ashley, then a couple of quick ones from me, so we can get to the questions.
Yep, thanks, Andrew. So Cyber Essentials is a fast track for companies needing immediate certification. So ISO 27001, so a much longer timeline, suits businesses that can commit to a comprehensive setup process. So what that means is it's a lot more time consuming to put a lot of thought and resources. You need to bring a lot of different stakeholders together and have a plan of how you're going to implement an ISMS. So with Cyber Essentials, it's a standalone point in time assessment. And as Andrew said, it's with ISO 27001, there's a lot more sort of continuous improvement, and it's also looking at stuff. So when you're having audits, it's looking at stuff that's brought up in the previous audit and seeing if the controls have, if the mitigation has been put in place since the findings were found out in the first audit, whereas it's not like that with Cyber Essentials. Theoretically, you could achieve Cyber Essentials, do absolutely nothing for 10 months, come back, spend a month on improving it all, and then you could pass again, which obviously we don't advise that. You should try and make sure you're looking at those 5 controls throughout the year, but that's probably not going to work as well with ISO 27001 as auditors are going to they're going to ask evidence and look into meetings recorded. They're going to look for comprehensive evidence to show that the controls have been implemented the whole year round successfully. So yeah, with Cyber Essentials, it's 1 to 2 weeks really. You can make sure these 5 controls are set up and in place. Shouldn't take longer than that, especially for smaller organisations that are a lot less complex. The assessment time, so it could be so the self questionnaire. I advise you take your time to fill it out, but really it shouldn't take longer than a day or 2 to fill out the questionnaire. And then after you filled out the questionnaire, one of the assessors typically marks it within 24 hours. And if you're going on to Cyber Essentials Plus, we try to get that scheduled in within the next 2 weeks. So the renewal, it's an annual renewal, so it needs to be renewed every 12 months. It's around the same 5 technical controls. That scope never changes. Yeah, ready for the next one.
Okay, so the next one is IT Governance, Cyber Essentials, and 27001 Solutions. So if Ashley will just quickly describe about these what these are.
Yeah, I won't go into too much detail with these, but at IT Governance, we offer different packages based on your organization's needs. So the basic package includes minimal support, whereas if you go over get a little help package, you get 2 hours of consultancy. So it gives organizations the freedom to know that they've got an assessor on hand to schedule in meetings and go through anything they're unsure about. So a lot of cases, I advise that's the best one to go for, is get a little help. But if your organization really needs a lot of help, maybe they're a much larger organization that needs that has quite sort of complex requirements, then it might be worth getting the 7 hours, or vice versa. It could be a really small organization that really needs a lot of hand holding. Then I would go for the Get a Lot of Help package. So with Get a Lot of Help, you get the same assessor from Cyber Essentials to Cyber Essentials Plus. So you get them throughout the whole range of certifications. So it can make it a lot easier to have the same assessor to avoid any confusion. Yeah, ready for the next one. Yeah, so these are the 5 main steps to achieve Cyber Essentials certification. So the first part is defining the scope of the organization. So when you can, we advise that you try and cover the scope of the whole organization. But when there's a subset, or you need to exclude other networks, you can write this in the scope. So a common example is whole organization excluding development network. So the next one is the SAQ. So once you've defined the scope, you do that during the SAQ, which is the questionnaire. So as part of that, you'll then fill out the whole questionnaire, going through and answering all the questions, and anything you're unsure at, you can ask one of the assessors on the portal, and we can get back to you. But yeah, with the questionnaire, it's now on ITG's portal. It used to be on the Pervade portal, but we have it built in now, so it's all in one place, making it really easy. The next part is So once you've completed Cyber Essentials, if you then have Cyber Essentials Plus, the technical assessment needs to be booked in. So the Cyber Essentials Plus assessor will look at your Cyber Essentials assessment, and they'll select a scope from that assessment, and they'll get back to you with a scope. And from there, we'll schedule in a pre-engagement call where we go over your scope and select a random sample based on the scope, and then we answer any questions around the assessment day, any concerns. We make sure you're prepared for it and have the vulnerability agents installed. So the next part is the external scan. So we send out a external scans permission letter before the day of the assessment. So that's one part of the assessment day, is carrying out the external scan. And yeah, any vulnerabilities that are found on the scan, you do get 30 days to remediate. That's the same as the internal scan as well. So once the assessment, internal scan, and external scan are finished, you get your Cyber Essentials Plus certificate. So that's usually within 2 days we can get your certificate issued once you've meeting all the criteria passing. So I mentioned before, you get that 30 days remediation time. If there is any findings during the assessment, you do get time to remediate against that. But once everything's completed, we typically get certificates sent out in 24 hours. Yep, that's everything. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So now I'm just going to quickly talk about what you need, some of the things with 27001. We'll do this for a few minutes and then we can answer a few of the questions at the end of it. We're always doing webinars on 27001 if you want to get more details, but you'll get this in your pack anyway, so it's always good to see. So 27001 is clauses and controls. So these are the clauses where we talk about. So these are the management system, okay? So it talks about leadership, risk, context, who is you are as the organization, planning, improvement, support. All these are the things that you need to make sure that you're addressing as an organization. So that's the really key thing. If you're going to be doing an implementation, so we have a product called Fast Track, which is a really useful, effective and efficient and particularly cost effective way of implementing 27001. We've had literally thousands of organizations certified against this. It's very popular even up to quite large organizations, etc. So the process you have to do, it's like any sort of project. You have to have a mandate. Mandate is really important in the initiation because that's where you get leadership commitment to the processes you're going through. If you don't have leadership, don't have commitment from the organization, 27001 is very difficult to do. You then establish your project. So it's initiation. So this is a standard project approach, which is incredibly effective. You do your management framework, understand what is happening, what is going on. That is your sort of like your approaches to continual improvement, what you're doing about roles and responsibilities, all these different things which are part of the system. You then need to understand and start implementing baseline security criteria and security controls. That's where Cyber Essentials could be of a lot of use in helping you get to the point where you've got some technical controls in there, but you have to do others, and they're going to be based on risk. So risk is the engine about this. What are your risks? How are you addressing that? What controls are you using to address those risks throughout the system? And then you implement it, yeah, and then you start measuring, monitoring, and view. Plan, do, check, act. It's all about continual improvement, and it's about demonstrating continual improvement, and that's when you go to the certification audit. Pretty straightforward, a lot of work. We can make it a lot easier for you, a lot quicker for you. As I say, we're always running 27001 webinars, and if you go to our YouTube channel, IT Governance, you'll find quite a few recordings there, and specifically on 27001 if that's what you're interested in. Because as I say, gone through those reasonably quickly. Again, you can find out more about our Fast Track managed service. One of the things where people sometimes forget is you've got to maintain your certification. This is where we can really help with you, with a specialist who can make sure you're doing all this and doing all that and getting all the things that you need to get done to maintain your certification. And also there's a link to find our standards. Now, We've got 5 minutes, so we're going to try and do some questions. This is where I always, let me see. Okay. Oh, dear me, I've just lost the questions. So, right. Okay, let's see here. So, let me just see if there's questions for me. Right. Do you train to become Cyber Essentials Assessor? I run a small cybersecurity company and wish to provide the service to the potential clients. I don't know the answer to that question. That is one that we can definitely do offline. So we'll come back to you on that. Is there a benefit of going beyond the ISO technical controls, e.g. it's not encrypted, but encrypting using TPM? Right. So the question is there a benefit of going past the controls on 27001? Well, you implement the controls to the point that you need to address your risk. So it doesn't tell you that you do TPM or MFA. It tells you you've got to deal with access control. You've got to deal with encryption. So you do it to the level that you as an organization need to do it. So remember I briefly said that if you've got an encryption policy or cryptography policy, it could be a paragraph for some organizations. It could be 250 pages for another organization, all depending on risk. So, yeah. Ashley, do you want to answer a couple of questions you can see there quickly?
Oh, sorry, microphone was turned off. There we go. Yeah, sure. Let me just have a look. So Steve Edwards, does step 4 externals apply to Plus only or both? So the external scan is just for the Cyber Essentials Plus. So in Cyber Essentials Plus, there's internal scanning and external scanning. So the external scan is looking at all devices that are externally facing, such as possibly a web server, but that's not looked at during the Cyber Essentials SAQ. Okay, what other questions?
Another one, Ashley, and then I'll do another one.
Yeah.
Well, Ashley's looking for that. There's a question in there that I've just seen. Someone says, when in our ISO 27001 certification process, should we engage your organisation? We did a lot of prep work. Right. We are not a certification body, okay? We're not a CB. So we can help you with implementing and your 27001. But what we can definitely do, and this is a requirement before you go for certification, is we can help you and do your internal audit. Okay, the certification body will want an independent internal audit again against your ISO 27001, and we can definitely help you with that. Okay, and we can actually, we can point you in direction of certification bodies and everything, but they're independent. Ashley, do you want to do one last question from your side?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've got one from Henry. Did you say that all USB ports need to be disabled for Cyber Essentials? So I don't believe that's specifically one of the questions in the SAQ, but I think it's a good practice. Yeah, it's a good control to have in place. I'm not sure. I don't think it is specifically one of the questions, but there is a question on removing unsupported software. I know that's definitely one of the questions. So, as part of maintaining your devices, it's probably one of the things that you should look into. Do you need those USB ports enabled? But yeah, I don't think that is specifically a question. But one of them is, yeah, definitely on removing any unsupported software. And yeah, I believe there's some other questions around that.
Okay, thank you. And just one little quick one before we run out of time. My understanding is the only reason an ISO 27001 certified company needs cyber essentials if for a government contract is that a realistic viewpoint? Well, government will require it. I still think it's a very worthwhile thing doing, even if you've got your 27001. It's another thing which just shows that you're doing some technical controls and dealing with your basic cyber hygiene as well as all the other stuff. And I'd just like to say, on behalf of myself and Ashley, thank you for listening to our webinar and have a good day.
Yep, thank you everyone.